Welcome to Private Equity Profits. Clifford Locks is a certified board of director, a trusted confidant to CEOs, C-level exec, and high-potential employees to help them clarify goals, unlock their potential, and create actionable strategic plans. Seth Green is the nation's foremost authority on growing your portfolio companies with direct response marketing. He is the founder of the direct response marketing firm Market Domination LLC, and he is an 8-time best-selling author who has been interviewed on NBC, CBS, Forbes Inc., CBS Money Watch, and many more. Cliff and Seth interview top players in the financial sector, focusing on private equity firms, venture capital companies, and family offices, discussing developments and trends shaping the industry. These experts will share with you how they've grown their businesses and increased profit, and how you can too. And now, here's your host, Cliff Locks.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Private Equity Profits Podcast. I'm Cliff Locks, your host. Today's guest is Justin Daniels, an equity partner at the Baker Donaldson firm, with a 130-year history of delivering results for clients nationally and internationally across a broad range of legal issues. Justin offers corporate private equity and portfolio clients his expertise, including portfolio companies deploying and scaling technology. He's an expert at SaaS, fintech, data centers, autonomous vehicles, drones, and cybersecurity. He helps his clients make data-driven business decisions while ensuring data privacy and cybersecurity risk management. Justin's corporate practice covers all stages of business growth cycles, from structuring new ventures and raising capital to advising on acquisitions and divestitures and negotiating important contracts with vendors, employees, customers. He's been involved in M&A transactions worth over $2 billion collectively. Justin, thanks for being on the show today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
I'm very happy you're with us today. And we're going to have a great conversation, and our listeners are going to really appreciate your views. Tell me about your background and how you ended up in the industry.
So my background, when I got out of college, I was going to go to law school, but for whatever reason, I'm not the best standardized test taker back then. Okay. So I ended up in business school, did my first year at MBA school. Then I got into law school, and then I finished both programs at night in 5 years from Duquesne University, where I grew up. So the benefit of doing all that was it really helped me realize that, hey, I really enjoy business. And so that's where I initially got into corporate law, and I wanted to work on M&A transactions, and I did that. And then along the way, because Atlanta is really becoming a big technology town, I really picked up a real focus on technology. And then in 2015, I got really exposed to cybersecurity, and the bell went off for me that said, hey, this is an area in technology that is an overlay for like everything. I really should learn more about this. And then that's when I started to create conferences in Atlanta, speak in Israel and the UK about cybersecurity. And unusually for an M&A lawyer, I have handled both ransomware and other kinds of data breaches. So that's kind of how my path meandered around to where I am today, which is being a corporate M&A and transactional attorney who really focuses in on the technology field.
You advise your clients also about creating NFTs and smart contracts. Can you speak about the importance of this? And what are some of the challenges and pitfalls associated with investing in NFTs and the benefits of smart contracts?
Okay, so let's try to unpack that question.
That's very kind.
For the benefit of our audience, NFTs is one of the use cases of blockchain technology. Mm-hmm. Decentralized finance is another one. Mm-hmm. Bitcoin, which is really an international payment regime, is yet another. So we're going to talk about NFTs. Really what we're talking about here with an NFT, it's unique digital code that evidences ownership of some type of asset that is recorded on the blockchain. And the best real world example I could give you would be, think of your house. You live in your physical house, but what evidences your ownership of the house? It's the deed. And the deed is recorded on the real estate records. So if you replace the deed with an NFT, your house with the underlying asset, it could be a digital picture, it could be some asset in real world, and you replace the real estate records with the digital ledger, that's in short how NFTs kind of work. What's interesting about the whole NFT market is figuring out how they're going to be regulated, because like a lot of things, and the way to think about this type of technology is I call it the BLT. I don't mean lettuce and tomato. I mean business, legal, and technology. So the business opportunity and the technology are outpacing the law. And what I mean by that is, are NFTs securities, or are NFTs, depending on how you do it, really should be regulated under some part of intellectual property law.
Okay.
And so the challenge you have with investing in NFTs is the transfer of NFTs is not very mature when it comes to intellectual property law and understanding who has what rights. Because if you create something, you have certain intellectual property rights, the right to display it, the right to make modifications to it, the right to sell it. And the way NFTs are now and how they're coded, exactly what rights you are getting is not entirely clear. The only exceptions I really think that there are to that is if you want to go and buy one of the digital videos from the NFL or the NBA, because the organization that runs and owns the exchange also owns the intellectual property rights. So you have a direct relationship. OpenSea and a bunch of the others, they're just like an eBay of digital assets.
Excellent.
That's all they're doing. And so that's, if I'm an investor, that's where you really need to be careful. And this is still really in an evolutionary period as we talk, or February of 2023.
All right. So we're early at this point. When we look at the smart contracts and we look at NFTs working collaboratively together, will it help move those discussions forward? I mean, is it an SEC? Is it the Copyright Office? I see them both having conversations within the industry. They're listening.
So the way to think about this is, when you are trying to create a community of people who want to come to your exchange or buy and sell NFTs, well, how do most people or exchanges incentivize people to want to use their site? Economics, saying, hey, if you come to our site, we have this native token, it can be worth something. That's what gets you into issues with the SEC. Are you offering a security? And then there's the Howey test. We don't want to get into all that today. But my point is, the way that people are trying to build communities and scale is through using economic incentives, which implicates securities laws.
Very good.
Separate from that is, if I want to transfer an NFT to you, and then you decide, hey, I want to market it and make t-shirts out of it and whatever, that goes to, well, what intellectual property rights did you get from me? Because an NFT is really a type of smart contract because it's coded and it can be exchanged. And one of the things about the whole industry is a smart contract, it's kind of a misnomer. It's really not all that smart. All it really is digital code that if certain conditions are met, it will execute or do something. That's all a smart contract really is.
Right. You unraveled that extremely well.
Oh, well, thank you. I've had practice speaking about it over the years. I have to tell you, the first few times I did it, it was harder, but every time you get out and you read a lot about how to explain it in terms that people understand, you get better at it.
Okay. You're an expert. You advise your clients on cybersecurity. You have a practical approach when it comes to cybersecurity. And can you discuss more of that?
Sure. So when I think about your audience in the private equity and portfolio companies, the way I look at cybersecurity for private equity is in three big buckets. One bucket is when you're making the investment. Two is operationally, day to day on, for your portfolio companies. And then three, what do you do if the worst happens when we have incident response? And so my approach is using NIST is, one, identify what are we trying to protect here. For certain companies, it could be their website. For other companies, it's their intellectual property. How are we going to protect it? Using MFA and point detection, what's our budget? What are we using to detect if there are intrusions or unusual traffic? How are we going to respond? And then the worst happens, how are we going to not only respond, but what can we learn when we have an incident or something like that? So that's one part. But then there's operationally, what are we doing day to day? Because these threats are constantly evolving. And so one of the challenges I see with private equity is, as you know, every deal kind of has a cadence. They want to get it done in 30, 45, or 60 days. And when you throw in cybersecurity and the time it might take to really look at somebody's network, a lot of people like, do we really want to spend the time on doing this? Because Cliff, if I said to you, hey, Cliff, I'm interested in investing or buying your company, but I want my third-party vendor to come on your network and we're going to look around, how would you react to that? Would you say, sure, or what might you say?
Well, that due diligence is critical at this point, and we need to do it early on the integration piece. So it really needs to get done. I mean, what would I say is the individual seller? I'd be a little apprehensive. The NDAs are in place. There's a lot of money riding on the transaction. It's going to enrich the founders. Do you have a choice?
Well,
part of
many companies will not only say no, they'll say hell no.
Okay.
Because think about it. If I come onto your network, and I've had this happen, we'll do the due diligence and we'll find something. And then what do?
You're going to lower the price.
Not only that, but if there's an intrusion or a breach, the deal may come to a halt. Yeah, when you find one already. So companies are really reluctant from a portfolio company or seller to really allow you to go in there and do what I call the cyber proctology exam. Usually what happens is you have to wait until after the deal is done. And that's when I tell clients, it's like, you really need to cool your jets and withstand your desire to integrate everything, because once it's your network, you should be going on to really do the deep dive to see if there are any kind of intrusions. If people don't believe me, I'm like, look at the Starwood Marriott.
Very good.
Deal.
There's a lot of stories, and they're real.
Yes.
The intrusions that aren't even know, sometimes they're in the systems at this point. And the software is out there. It's getting smarter. Or
think about buying a company for $5 million, a small acquisition, and then you integrate them into your network, and the threat actor who was already in the target company's network now migrates onto yours and ransomwares you, and it costs you $30 million to fix the problem. Well, now that cyber risk on that M&A transaction exceeded the purchase price.
Right. Well said. You and your wife, Jody, released a book last year, a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. Tell us about your book.
Hey, the book looks better than I do. Anyway. So my wife and I collaborated on a book called Data Reimagined, Building Trust One Byte at a Time. And so my wife is an entrepreneur and privacy consultant. We're up to 5 employees. And the idea behind the book is it's written for the non-technical business executive to help them educate them about, hey, how can I use privacy and cybersecurity practices to build trust with my customers?
Excellent. That's critical. If you think about it, that's the foundation of being able to do business is trust.
Yes.
The cybersecurity of it is we got open APIs. We've got the client's data in-house. At one point in one of my engagements, I had set something up for Amazon. I had the whole data file for Amazon for all their products and net pricing and what they were selling the products and what the product returns are. So when you're looking at it, there's a level of respect for that data set.
Cliff, think about cybersecurity, and your data is now an extension of you, because it's now able to draw such a vivid portrait of who you are, from where you go all day, what websites you frequent. And so the idea that we're talking about is how you treat someone's data at this point is by extension how you treat them.
Very good. All right, because we're going to go into another topic, which is smart city technology, which lends itself to continue this conversation. So let's talk about smart city technology that you're working on.
I have been very fortunate. There's a city in Georgia, Peachtree Corners, and they have a curiosity lab. And so what that is, it's a 25,000-foot innovation center. We have a 3-mile autonomous vehicle track, and we have IoT devices strung all along the street. And so we are like a test bed for innovative technology, because think about how you might want to go from testing in a sterile laboratory and going straight to the city of Atlanta. There probably needs to be an interim kind of crawl, walk, run step. And so that's what this is. So we have projects that have run the gamut. There are four autonomous vehicles that go around the tech park that you can get on and ride as like a shuttle. We've done projects with digital cameras that people can upload their ring feeds to allow law enforcement to have real-time information about potential crime. We have worked on projects around the first deployment of e-scooters in the country, so you could get the scooter, drive it somewhere, and the scooter would drive itself off to the collection area. So it's a really an amazing research laboratory for all this smart city technology. And it really, in my mind, shows you that if you think we've had a lot of data collection before, well, with drones flying in from the left, autonomous vehicles from the right, the rise of blockchain, you haven't seen anything yet when it comes to the amount of data that's going to be collected. And smart cities will be at the forefront of that as they take the the ARPA money, the American Rescue Plan Act, and they modernize. And so the question becomes, how do you have all this innovation at the same time and respect privacy and have good security? Because there have been all kinds of breaches of school systems, municipalities, city governments, counties. It's just gone on rampantly.
They're going into the banks, they're going into the hospitals, they're shutting down hospitals. It's a very challenging medical devices. How do you manage this process? I look at it, the fiduciary responsibility goes back to the individuals that created the code and the device. In other words, so the IoT devices, which are going to be probably billions of these units on a global level, the data feeds, zero trust, meaning can we build the chipsets into the devices where they keep going back for the validation side versus using, certificate technology. Our listeners probably know they have the S at the HTTPS. That S is the secure socket. Not very secure, but zero trust, I think, is where we're headed. You keep going back, could be every 3 seconds, 5 seconds, and do a validation of who we communicating with between. Will it eliminate spam? I bet you a lot of our listeners want to get rid of the spam. They must be getting 200 to 300 emails a day. What is your vision to fix this? Let's think about this.
Well, if you want to fix the challenge around cybersecurity, the first thing that has to be done is a cultural shift.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is, Cliff, when my parents grew up, they didn't wear a seatbelt in their car.
Okay.
But when you and I get in a car, I bet you, what do we do without even thinking about it? Well, we put on a seatbelt. So what changed? A couple things. One, Mothers Against Drug Driving had a really great educational campaign that says, hey, buckling up saves lives. And I think that made a real impact with people. And then two, legally, I think almost every state, maybe save for one, has laws requiring you to buckle up.
Okay.
And so what's happened over time is people have changed their habits. We now get in our car and we buckle up and don't think about it. It's just part of what we do.
Right.
The point of my story is, how do we get cybersecurity to be the digital seatbelt of the 21st century so that cybersecurity is a core design feature and not an afterthought?
So it's top of mind. It's built in everything we touch, because we're finding smart refrigerators, dishwashers, a multitude. And these are all IoT devices, and our listeners may not realize that. They're all connected. There's some predictive analytics for service. There's others where things are out of tolerance. They're mining the data, because at the end of the day, the data is more valuable than the device.
Well, look at it this way. When we started our conversation today on Zoom, a pop-up came on my computer that said, hey, we're going to record this. Got it. And I had to hit a button.
Okay.
Do you remember when Zoom first came out? Did you even have to have a password for Zoom? You didn't.
Did not.
You know why, Cliff?
Please. Well, people drop it in.
So what happened? So let me walk you through this, because this goes to answering your question.
Thank you.
So with Zoom, well, what does every startup want to do? They want to scale and have customers.
Sure.
And the thing that made Zoom such a killer app, besides coming out right before the pandemic, is how easy it is to use.
Excellent.
Well, I have seen this happen in my own deals, and Zoom is another one. Well, if we have a password and we put in security where we have multi-factor authentication, well, that causes friction with the user. It's not going to be as easy to use. So what'd they do? Well, we don't want any of that. So Zoom, as you know, during the pandemic became a verb because everyone started using it, but that brought along the threat actor in the form of Zoom bombing.
Okay.
Then it comes out that Zoom is sharing user data with Facebook, and they get themselves sued under the California Consumer Privacy Act and other laws. And they end up settling for $85 million. And as part of that settlement, the PR spin was, hey, we're bringing in the privacy and security professionals, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to go back and circling to your question is, why didn't Zoom just build privacy and security by design as a core feature of
Excellent.
And why didn't they? You now know, because what?
Had friction.
It adds friction. It's inconvenient. We need to scale because they scaled so well that the cost of fixing privacy and security was just a cost of doing business. But if you're an autonomous vehicle or you're a drone or you're some of this other stuff, I don't think you get that luxury. But the bigger point is you have to change people's mindset to where if I'm building a new product, well, security has to be a core design feature, but we're not there. Until that shifts, we're going to continue to see these issues because as we have new technology, and you and I talked about ChatGPT, all that's going to do is create the opportunity for an evolving cyber threat that uses ChatGPT to launch the perfect cyber attack, in addition to writing the term paper for your college student.
Okay. Now, some of our listeners may not be familiar or that familiar with ChatGPT. Somebody put it to work to take the bar exam to be a lawyer. They've taken it out for physicians to pass their particular certification, in their practice, and it has passed. It's not done well, but it has passed on both of those occasions. So it's a little concerning, what you're looking at. Of course, these agencies are also using photo ID as individuals go in to sit for these tests. They're aware of what's taking place. So you have bandwidth in this area. In other words, you're an expert at it. So our clients can reach out to you and have a conversation, and
I'm happy to have a conversation.
Okay.
Cliff, I think it would be a misnomer to say anyone's an expert with these newer technologies, but I worked on my first global rollout of an artificial intelligence tool for human resources and vetting resumes. And I guess my point for the audience is you're not going to unring the bell with these new technologies, but really what we need to do is to have a really honest and public debate about putting guardrails, what are the consequences when it comes to our privacy, security, and other things, as opposed to what happened with social media, where it just came out, we used it, and there were all these unintended consequences that have helped polarize our society that we're still dealing with. So we need to learn from those experiences and treat ChatGPT and AI and think about them differently in light of what we've learned.
Well said. Is there anything I haven't discussed that you'd like to talk about?
I'm trying to think. Anything we haven't discussed? Nothing that I can think of, unless you want to discuss with my fashion sense, which will get my wife to just start laughing.
You got a good sense of humor. You're doing important work. Thank you so much for your time, Justin. Your sound advice on NFTs and cybersecurity are very, very important. As we go into adding more smart contracts, we're going to move to the metaverse. You can see the tokenization, gamification of a multitude of, e-commerce and other programs. You and I had spoken about some of the needs, in other words, the NFL, some of the professional sports are stepping into the space at this point. I sit on the board of a couple of companies that are in the metaverse. It's pretty exciting, but again, we always talk about the ethics in AI. And let's have that conversation before we design anything on how we're going to train and what the outcome looks like, what the vision of success looks like, and stay out of the gray and black areas, and be a good citizen. Our listeners have really gained a great deal of benefit from you, and I want to thank you for sharing your vision. I want to thank our listeners. I look forward to being back with you shortly for another episode of the Private Equity Profits Podcast. The show has been produced by Market Domination, LLC.